Senator Bernie Sanders has long claimed he doesn't get a fair shake from what he calls the corporate media. Now his campaign manager is challenging the mainstream media in an interview with Vanity Fair headlined, "Fox has been more fair, why Bernie's team has had it with MSNBC." Tonight's 2020 Power Panel, the aggressive progressive Chris Hahn, Fox News contributor Kristen Soltis Anderson, and Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk. Great to have you all. Charlie, the author of the upcoming book, The MAGA Doctrine. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chris, is the Democratic establishment freaking out about the possibility of a Democratic socialist and Bernie Sanders being at the top of the ticket?
You know, I think there's some people who are freaking out. I think it's a little too early to freak out about anything. 2% of the delegates, if that, have been picked. I think people need to stop thinking about who's electable. I remember 4 years ago thinking there's no way Donald Trump could be elected, and I was completely wrong. And I know there are a lot of people on the right that say, oh, please let it be Bernie, please let it be Bernie. Bernie's got an army. Bernie has a message that resonates with a lot of the same people who voted for Donald Trump. So I would be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it, and that might not be good for you.
Kristen, are never Trumper Republicans seriously watching this Democratic race, trying to find a candidate to support, or are they more likely to stay home?
Well, about 1 in 10 Republicans says that they don't approve of the job the president's doing. That 9 in 10 do. He's got very strong approval within the GOP. But among those Republicans who Trump is just not their flavor, they're hoping that there will be someone they can vote for instead of voting for Trump. But if that person is Bernie Sanders, he may be too far to the left for them. That means they'd have to write someone in. So that's why you have a lot of moderate Republicans trying to make the case for, say, someone like a Bloomberg. But I think it's absolutely correct that Bernie Sanders could 100% be elected president of the United States. Even though people will say in polls that things like having a socialist, somebody who's over the age of 75, someone who's had a heart attack, all of these things that are potential knocks against Bernie Sanders, people will say, well, I don't know that I want that in a president. You still see him faring reasonably well in these head-to-head matchups against Donald Trump nationwide.
Charlie, is the political establishment on both sides very anxious at this stage, and with good reason?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I'm not supposed to feel bad for Senator Bernie Sanders, a socialist, but I just don't like to see people get ripped off. At what point is Senator Sanders going to say, I'm sick and tired of having things stolen from me? I mean, in 2016, you can make the compelling argument that the nomination was just as much his as it was Hillary Clinton. And he was kind of forced into almost an arranged marriage, if you will, to endorse her, and kind of half-heartedly. And some would argue that because of that, Hillary Clinton didn't win the presidency. Look, I think Senator Sanders, I will agree with Chris, though. I think Senator Sanders has a path. Anyone could possibly win the presidency. And I do think that there's a lot to be said that he'd be tough to run against. Never underestimate running against someone who's willing to give away the world. I mean, running against Free is very, very difficult to run against, and especially someone with a younger base that he has and millions of small dollar donors. I think he'd be formidable, but I just think it's quite interesting to see the Democrat establishment and the elites in the Democrat Party do everything they possibly can to try to prevent him from getting the nomination.
All right, other Democrat campaigns are bashing Michael Bloomberg as he's about to jump on the debate stage tomorrow night. Take a listen to this.
Michael Bloomberg, with $62 billion, can buy every ad he wants, but he can't, in fact, wipe away his record. I'm looking forward to debating Michael Bloomberg.
He does not have a right to buy the presidency, especially after being mayor of New York and having a racist stop and frisk policy.
Michael Bloomberg to blame the inability of the banks to continue to discriminate against people is outrageous.
For Senator Warren needs a little tea with lemon. Chris, your reaction to those attacks?
Look, I mean, the man is trying to win the presidency. He's using the law as it stands. Buckley v. Valeo decided in 1970. He says he could spend his own money. I don't think that that's a good attack. I don't think people care about where people raise their money from and get their money from. People who care about that probably have already chose Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren as their candidate. There's, 70% of the Democratic electorate that hasn't chose those two right now in polls, and he's competing for them. And I think what we're looking at right now is perhaps a contested convention. I think Bloomberg's been playing for that. I think he's been playing it smart. I think a lot of the negative stuff you've seen put out about Mike Bloomberg the last couple of weeks were put out by his team themselves to get ahead of it. And I think that's a smart play ahead of Super Tuesday. And then we won't be talking about it anymore after that.
Elizabeth Warren tweeting, "It's a shame Mike Bloomberg can buy his way into the debate, but at least now primary voters curious about how each candidate will take on Donald Trump can get a live demonstration of how we each take on an egomaniac billionaire." Kristen, are we about to find out if Bloomberg is ready for prime time?
I think Bloomberg is going to prove to be a better hypothetical candidate than an actual one. I think the debates are potentially going to be challenging for him, meeting with voters in the way that all these other candidates have been doing for a long time. That is not necessarily something we've seen him do as much of. So I think once he becomes a real candidate, not a hypothetical candidate, anymore. It's going to be, it'll be a little more challenging. Now, in the Super Tuesday states, he's got enough money where he can just bomb the airwaves. And I think that's why you're seeing some of those Democratic adversaries really have much tougher talk about him than any of the other Democrats in the field thus far. They've basically been playing nice with each other compared to the way they've talked about Bloomberg over this last week. I think that they resent the fact that they've worked so hard. They put in all this effort in places like Iowa and New Hampshire, and Bloomberg can roll in with all of his money and make all of it not matter.
Okay, live on our screen, we've got President Trump at LAX heading to Nevada tonight. Live pictures there for our viewers at home. So just wanted to bring everybody up to speed. There he is boarding Air Force One, making his way toward Nevada. Meanwhile, the president taking aim at Bloomberg on Twitter. What Mini Mike is doing is nothing less than a large-scale illegal campaign contribution. He's spreading money all over the place, only to have recipients of his cash payments, many former opponents, happily joining or supporting his campaign. Isn't that called a payoff? Let me ask you this question, Charlie. Doesn't that elevate Bloomberg when he mentions him, when a president mentions him?
Well, look, whoever the president attacks, it seems that they go up in the Democrat primary. I will say, though, if played properly, Bloomberg's entrance into the campaign, the way he's spent his way into the debate stage, should be a gift for Senator Bernie Sanders. He embodies everything he built his coalition around. It's a plutocracy, pay to play, no small dollar donations whatsoever. And I just find it puzzling how the Democrat National Committee for months had such a hyper focus on how many small dollar donors people had to make the stage, and they just threw that out completely when someone decides to spend $400 million to try to make themselves relevant. So all this being equal, I think if Senator Bernie Sanders plays his cards correctly, he could be the nominee, and it's a perfect foil for him. Bernie, Bloomberg, it's everything that he's built his coalition against.
Fascinating stuff. Charlie, Kristen, Chris, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.